The history of censorship and book banning in America is rooted in systemic racism, and it's important to acknowledge this truth. Throughout history, books have been banned for reasons ranging from political dissidence to religious disagreement, but the ban on books due to racial themes and ideas is an especially disturbing and ongoing trend. It's a harsh reality that highlights the long-lasting effects of racism and prejudice on our society. The censorship of African American literature dates back to the late 19th century, with the suppression of slave narratives. During this time, many former slaves sought to tell their stories and offer insight into the horrors of slavery, but their work was met with hostility from white publishers and censors who sought to silence them. Their personal accounts were deemed too graphic, too emotional, and too real to be shared with the public. This attitude continued into the early 20th century with the publication of Jean Toomer's Cain, a groundbreaking work that bridged the gap between African American culture and white America. The book was banned in many parts of the country, mostly in the South, where segregation and Jim Crow laws were still prevalent. The themes of the novel, which included interracial relationships and the intersection of African American folklore and modernity, were too radical for many white Americans, who saw the novel as a threat to their social order. The censorship and banning of books with African American themes continued throughout the Civil Rights era. Novels like James Baldwin's Go Tell It on the Mountain and Richard Wright's Native Son were banned for their frank depictions of racism and violence. Black authors were told that their work was too incendiary and dangerous for an audience to consume. These accusations were ironic, given the fact that the authors were merely exposing the harsh realities of life for African Americans in America. The censorship of African American literature wasn't just limited to novels and memoirs. Even the genre of hip-hop, which originated in black communities in the Bronx in the 1970s, was met with censorship and hostility. The genre's raw, unfiltered depictions of life in urban America were seen as threatening by many in the white establishment. Rap music was often blamed for the rise of gang violence and drug use, even though many of the genre's lyrics spoke out against those very things. This history of censorship in African American literature is not just confined to America. In South Africa, during apartheid, the government censored books by black authors such as Steve Biko and Nelson Mandela, seeing their works as a threat to the white government's power. Censorship and book banning have long been used as tools of oppression, often in the name of protecting society from harmful or dangerous ideas. But in reality, censorship exists to maintain power structures and promote dominant narratives. This is especially true when it comes to the censorship of African American literature. The suppression of black voices in literature is a way to maintain the status quo and perpetuate systemic racism. It's a way to silence those who seek to challenge the dominant narratives about race that have existed for centuries. By censoring African American literature, the white establishment is telling black writers that their perspectives, their stories, and their experiences are not valid or important. It's important to recognize that while censorship is harmful to all writers, it has a uniquely damaging effect on writers of color. When African American authors are denied the right to tell their stories, it reinforces the notion that their voices are not important, which perpetuates the cycle of inequality and oppression. To truly address the issue of book banning and censorship, we must examine the systemic racism that underpins it. We must confront the reality that our society is built on a foundation of oppression and inequality, and we must work to dismantle those structures that perpetuate hate and prejudice. We can start by reading and sharing works by African American authors, especially those that have been unfairly banned or censored. We must also support organizations that promote free speech and fight against censorship, such as the American Library Association and the National Coalition Against Censorship. By speaking out against censorship and supporting diverse voices in literature, we can work towards a more just and equitable society. We can ensure that no one is silenced, and that every story gets its chance to be told.